She said, you came through the floorboards.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she said, oh, sorry. I didn't mean that. You know what she's saying?
Yeah.
You're not supposed to come through the front door.
Yeah.
A person of African descent, a Muslim too? No, man,
Yeah.
you don't be a PhD in history of U of T in the front door. You snuck under the ground through the floorboards, trick your way through, and got your PhD.
No, I'm not worried at all. I rely on God, Allah.
When my wife's family came up, my wife's mother came in the 50s from Jamaica. And at that time, there was a wave of Caribbean, West Indian black people coming up, into Canada. And of course, this is different than Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia gives you, the real, history hundreds of years ago. But in Ontario, you see another form of it. And that is that, the main jobs that black people, were allowed to get, it was usually domestic servants. You work in people's houses and you work in the restaurants. And for the men, they were usually porters on trains. So, you have the train system, right? So you have the red cap. So red cap was one of the highest jobs that a black man could have. And they served the trains all over the countries as red cap, which is basically a servant again. So it was the system. You will almost never would see a black person in any political position, or you would see a black person, for instance, on television. Only till recently, you would start to see, a person of color on television. Even in sports, because basketball was invented by Naismith here in Canada and then taken to America. Here in Canada and in the U.S., there were no black people on the basketball court. Baseball was also white, and it wasn't, only till recently, a few decades ago, that black people even entered into these sports. So the system itself was set up that the people of color would have limited opportunities, and it was usually in a service position or entertainment. Yes, you have black singers, you have black dancers, entertainers, comedians, right? Because this is how the slave system is set up. And they will use you to entertain, they will use you to serve. And it wasn't until the 60s here in Ontario, because I can mainly speak about Ontario, although I've been to other places. The 60s was a rebellion that was going on in the United States and in the Caribbean, and it also came here. And, came up here in the late 60s, 70s, in the time of this rebellion. And we literally demonstrated, we struggled, we went to boards of education, we went to the government, in order to get the rights to be represented and also to have higher levels of employment, education. We had to literally fight for these things because the system was set up in such a way that you can forget about it. One interesting story. My wife was telling me, because we were talking about volunteerism, what is the benefits of being a volunteer? And she said, when I was, coming into my teens and 20s, the main thing I did was volunteer. And she said, now that I look back at it, the reason was because whenever you got a job in a restaurant or a store, they always put you in the back. You can't be in the front of the store. You cannot represent them because the natural racism that's outside, a black person could not represent this restaurant, could not represent this educational institution. And so therefore, she said, I'm not working in the back. So she worked as a volunteer in different organizations, got her education, because of this systemic racism that is there. I'll give you another example. This is in the 90s. I had succeeded, alhamdulillah. I got a master's in African history. This is my passion, and then just by the mercy of Allah, because I knew Arabic and I was into West African Islamic history, I was taken into the PhD program in the University of Toronto. And I had friends in Nigeria, and I traveled all throughout the land of the Hausa. And, I could go to the documents. And so I went to a very high level. You know what happened to me? I went through the system. I received a PhD,
Mm.
in the history department of University of Toronto, and I went into the office to give them my thesis, because they take your thesis and they put it in a special place, where all the theses of their graduates, sit. It's an honor. And the secretary was there, and I came in, as a clearly African American and Muslim. I dress like a Muslim, even if I'm in the university, right? So I came there and she said, "You got the PhD?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Oh my God, you came through the floorboards." That's what she said. She couldn't hold herself. She said, "You came through the floorboards."
Yeah. Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, sorry. I didn't mean that." You know what she's saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not supposed to come through the front door.
Yeah.
A person of African descent, a Muslim too? No, man, you don't be a PhD in history of U of T in the front door. You snuck under the ground through the floorboards, trick your way through, and got your PhD. That is systemic racism.
Yes.
That shows, and up until now, and you can go to the statistics, there's some startling statistics coming out of University of Toronto and other universities from the medical schools. And I believe at the University of Toronto, they said of the graduating class in the last few years, only one black person per year graduates as a doctor. This is systemic. And you can say, well, no, you people, no, because you don't get scholarships, or it costs so much money, and your family does menial jobs. It's a type of economic racism. How you are just, by the system, you are put into a lower position. And this is what Afro-Americans are saying when they say, "I can't breathe." Because breathing is not just physical, it's economic, it's psychological, it's political, it's all of these aspects. And that same lack of breath is what we are feeling here in Canada. The guy who got his knee on your neck, he's smiling, and he's a really nice Canuck, but he's his knee in your neck.
Do I feel that the New York police are providing enough protection, or do I have to have protection of my own? I look for protection from Allah.